welcome to Policing TV, where I'm delighted to be joined by Alison Hernandez, who has just been re-elected for a third term as the Devon and Cornwall Police and Crime Commissioner. Alison, thank you so much for joining Policing TV, um,
You're
and
welcome.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you,
Uh,
Bernard.
Tell us about that election campaign. It clearly went well for you. What were your feelings during the campaign and at the count?
Well, I tell you what, fundamentally, having a really large constituency that consists of the 18 MP seats, that's how large it is, population of 1.7 million, um, is a real challenge in an election because unless you've got millions of pounds, of which I did not, unless you've got thousands of volunteers, of which no one has, actually getting your message out to all those people is really hard. And I think there was potentially, I mean, I didn't boost a single Facebook or anything post online because I knew that wouldn't be enough to motivate people to want to go out and vote. So I'd say the campaign is hard. There are people who received little literature to no literature in some areas. And I think, that's partly why the turnout was so low. So many people forgot there was even an election on. It wasn't really covered much at all in the media nationally, never even mentioned, let alone the results not being mentioned nationally, but the actual election wasn't mentioned. So I'd say real challenge of an election for someone. I mean, during the campaign, I tell you what, the biggest issue for me was speaking to people who want things fixed that actually isn't the job of a police and crime commissioner. But it's going to have to be my job because no one's leading in those spaces. So I think I've learned quite a bit in terms of the campaign of what people need to feel safe where they live. Obviously, on the day of the count, there was a national surge to Labour. So my expectation was, Exeter and Plymouth, Labour held cities, who I work well with. But the surge was going out, and I didn't think I was going to claw that back. But once all the other results were declared, whether that was Cornwall, East Devon, North Devon, Torbay, I won in every other seat with a majority. So I think the feeling for me is one of absolute delight, obviously, that I'm still there with the experience I've now got to be able to take things forward on the things that matter to people.
So let's talk about that experience that you've got. You've had two terms, I think one of 4 years, one of 3 years, 7 years experience as Police and Crime Commissioner. What have you learned from that 7 years as PCC?
Well, actually, it's 8 years because the last election was postponed for a year due to COVID. So we had a 5 year term in my first term, then a 3 year short term in the second term. So I think with 8 years of experience, I think there was huge amount of learning in COVID, in the pandemic, with policing stepping into the space of enforcement and how you get that balance right with your community of that consent, consent for something which they're unsure about, they're unclear about, and the policing are having to step into that space. Huge learning from the pandemic, and that was around how daily having to check the rationale of the chief constable for his decision making of how he was going to use the enforcement powers across Devon, Cornwall, and the Isles of Scilly. So that was an absolutely crazy time in terms of level of working hours and actually really trying to get that balance right. And that you'll never get to that point in that way again, working so operationally on a day-to-day basis. I think for a police and crime commissioner is unusual. So I think I bring now some experience of how you would actually work with the chief constable on some really major operational challenges that we would normally not have been, I'd say, allowed to step into that space because it's their domain. But the pandemic really opened the mind of a chief constable to say, we're all in this together. How are we going to do this? And we really worked as a team. So I think it was some real learning out of that in terms of the experience. I think the other bit, just in terms of it, is what's really fascinating is the performance of Devon and Cornwall Police at the moment is not at its best. It's never been a poor performing force. But, His Majesty's Inspectorate, the Chief Inspector there, is really focused on trying to improve performance of forces and has got really hardcore about holding forces, inspection regimes tightly and being really clear that they're not good enough. And to get re-elected on a backdrop of that, I think is quite interesting, because all people actually care about is, do they have visibility of policing? Do they see the police and feel reassured? And do they think the police are focused on the right things? The performance of the force in their head, most people, isn't a day-to-day worry for them. They just want to see the results of the performance on the streets. They don't even mind about some of the challenges that the force might have about slowness in how they serve their victims and deal with their perpetrators. It really is about, I don't feel safe on the streets and I don't see the police enough. And that is still the core fundamental challenge that exists 8 years in, and that will continue to exist in 8 years' time, because they are pulled from pillar to post, police officers. The priorities from the government, there'll be priorities from me, there'll be priorities from smaller communities that will be speaking directly to the police, and they have so many priorities that I hope this time my police and crime plan can cut through that.
So, for those watching outside the United Kingdom, they may not understand the role of the Police and Crime Commission. In very broad terms, you don't have operational responsibility, but you have that key role representing the public. And so that, I guess, is why during the pandemic, it was all the more important that you and the Chief Constable were working in harmony, you helping to present the public perception, the public position, and engage with the public on those responses. The chief taking those operational decisions, and of course you providing that challenge. Let's look forward now. We've got about 8 years of experience as a police and crime commissioner, and recording this in Reading Station of all places. So if you pick up on the train in the background, my apologies. Let's look forward now to the next 4 years. So 5 year, 3 year, and a 4 year term. What do you want to achieve as the Police Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall Police over the next 4 years?
Well, the biggest feedback I've got from communities during this campaign, and I've been getting over those 8 years, but it's really writ large for me, is we talk about antisocial behaviour, but it's more than antisocial behaviour. We have got people who are antisocial drug users, antisocial alcoholics, who are causing fear and intimidation on the streets in our towns and cities. This isn't an isolated problem. This is a societal problem. And while I don't have responsibility for drug treatment, I don't have responsibility for housing, I don't have responsibility for alcohol treatment, I am certainly going to go and poke my nose in and see what I can do in that space to help people better, because what we've got now is clearly not working. I mean, we as a region of Southwest Police and Crime Commissioners created the Prisoners Building Homes project, which I still can't believe hasn't got real national recognition in the media, because we have got people who are now being trained up, hopefully, so they don't reoffend when they leave prison. We've got homes being built for those on the homeless register of local authorities. And I've been it's an uphill battle to get those local authorities to want to be part of this project. But we've got 82 homes being built this year in the Southwest. I hope it's not going to be a downfall because we've lost Mark Shelford in Avon and Somerset, because this should be a national house building programme for people who are on the homeless register. And, I can start fixing some of society's problems by actually focusing on the people we want to reduce offending with, the perpetrators who are causing issues in our society, and get them to be contributing positively. So I think for me, that's going to be my big focus this year. So we've got to sort the force out, the performance of the force, no doubt. But that's about me making sure I've got a substantive chief constable and we've got someone who can drive forward that performance. That's on me, and I need to make that decision this year about what I am going to do and how long I can keep a suspended chief constable for in light of the performance of the force. And that will be a professional judgment on me in terms of that later this year. So that has to happen, and that is really for the chief to do. So I'm going to be focused on those societal issues that the public are absolutely frustrated with, and they feel the streets are lawless because of it. So that's going to be my main focus for the next 4 years. You'll be interested, Bernard, that not one person, last time in the election, we got loads of emails from people lobbying about violence against women and girls. That didn't happen this time. And I worried it was virtue signalling in the last election. I'm very adamant that there's violence against men and boys. And that did not come up at all during this campaign on the doorstep, on the streets. People are not saying they want to see their streets safe. And that's got to be the focus for this next term.
So what I'm hearing there, Alison, is driving that force performance, taking a view on the chief constable, and tackling antisocial behaviour, in part through the housing project that you've described, but particularly in working with others, partnership working, and driving forward that performance through that engagement with other agencies. So plenty there to be working on in the next 4 years. I'd be delighted if Policing Insight and Policing TV were able to cover some of that work that you are driving forward and others are working with you on. For the time being, though, Alison, thank you so much for that perspective on your campaign, on those last 2 terms, and on the 3rd term that you're just embarking on. Congratulations again on your re-election, and I look forward to picking up further with you on the work that's going on in Devon Cornwall over the coming months and indeed years. Alison Hernandez, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Bernard.